You're listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at Ice and FireCon 2018.
This is a very salty Dornish panel. I'm very glad I came up with that name a little bit. So we'll just introduce the other people that are here. We have, far right, we have Emmett, who is also known as Paul Quentin from Song of Ice and Fire University.
Yeah, I'm Ahmad on Song of Ice and Fire University. I'm a half of Nodacast, a podcast going chapter by chapter through the books with Brendan Beefish, aka Jeff Hartline. And you can find my stuff at poorquentin.tumblr.com or just at poorquentin on Twitter.
And next to me, even closer, is the cosplayer, author, all-around cool person, organizer of the convention, Tara.
Yeah.
So.
Hi guys. At this point, if you don't know who I am, I said this earlier. If you don't know who I am at this point, then good for you, because that means you haven't. Actually, good for me, because that means you haven't seen me running around like a chicken with my head cut off, freaking out about everything.
But she does it so.
So yeah. So Tara, my name's Tara, and obviously Ice and FireCon is the big thing, but personally you can find me on Twitter, Tumblr, which I never use honestly, Instagram, pretty much any social media I have is at A Geek Saga, so that's my personal stuff if you want to follow me on, you see lots of pictures of my cats.
I do the dogs.
Don't look at me.
And I'm Mo. I have a Facebook page that I've Monstrous Cosplayer D and Monstrous Mo on Instagram, and I might be making a Tumblr. I have it on my app, but I need to find a clever Ice Waffle-related username.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm brainstorming that. But other than that, that's all I got, and I just wanted to make the panel because I thought it would be a fun idea. And then they wanted to join me, and I said, well, of course. So we have that. Okay, let's talk about Dawn. Don't we love Dawn, but also kind of hate some people what they've done for Dawn?
Yes.
Yes.
Good panel, guys.
Good panel. That's it. That's okay. Oh my god. Okay. I made banners, and I was going to bring up and totally forgot.
That story of my life.
Just like how the show did Dorn.
Yeah.
Such plans, and
because
it
guess
all
what?
kind of fell apart in execution.
I had the other banner and I had the Dark banner, and guess what? Those would have been really cool storylines to put in Dawn stuff, but they didn't. Thanks, Stephen D. So what we had was just a few sources you should be looking at, I guess, for other Dawn stuff, whatever we don't talk about. The one we had was Preston Jacobs, which he's just got a lot of material out there. There's something called the Dornish Master Plan, and Quentin is alive, and the Deeper Dawn, but it's also a bit tinfoil. I'm looking at my notes, and it's just like, God, PJ is the most, terror, and I put parentheses, and I'm sorry. But it's content about Dawn. He cites all of his things, which I think is at least positive.
Yeah.
Agreed. There should be more content on Dornish stuff, and he puts a lot of work into his.
Yeah,
so.
he puts a lot.
Well, I disagree with every single conclusion. I do appreciate that aspect.
I do think, because he does have a lot, because he puts a lot of emphasis on things possibly being too science fiction, because George R. R. Martin obviously wrote a lot of sci-fi.
Sure.
So that's what gets kind of tinfoil. But like I said, I do like that he does cite his sources and throws in nice little pictures and all that.
Exactly.
Stuff.
And he's got, his videos emphasize that there's stuff worth digging at in Dawn as much as any other part of the story, which I think is something that's often neglected. People invest a lot of theories and speculation and kind of literary ideas into many other aspects of the story, and Dorn often gets kind of ignored in those ways, but I think there's just as much to pull out of it there. So kudos for that, for sure.
Exactly. I remember because I was watching Quint, he's got one on Quint being alive, and I'm like, you got into the science of combustion with whips and Dragonfire and skin.
That's not what this is, dude. It's not a textbook about
it's not
things
textbook,
burn.
no.
It's a story.
But I'm like, I appreciate the detail at least. And then there's another YouTuber called Rawest, which I've listened to a lot of those stuff. It is a lot of, I think, there's some kind of regurgitation of stuff that's
I think a lot of what she does is just reading out loud.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she writes her own stuff, but honestly, everything that I've listened, and I'm not like bashing her or anything, but because at least it's something to listen to. But like, it does sound like most of what she does is kind of just pulled from like the wiki and World of Ice and Fire and everything. It's very basic stuff, and that's kind of like again, like you've been saying, is like I would love more content on Dorn. I know there's a lot of like written theories out there, but I like to listen to things when I'm like working or driving or whatever. So there's not enough. But
get on it, people.
Well, we're here to try to fix that, right? Like we're going to try to fix it and talk to you guys about Dorn.
I'm at least trying to put like a Band-Aid on as best as I can. Then there was another YouTuber, Squiver TV. It's like a couple half-hour videos, but he just talks about everything you could possibly imagine with Dorn and the maps, because he kind of talks about where everything's located, which I thought was kind of cool. And other than that, I just had the World of Ice and Fire and the Wiki of Ice and Fire that kind of gives you all of the lore that we can possibly have, and that somebody sources has all the references in the wiki for any house you could imagine. So yeah, can't go wrong with the books and the wiki. You really can. So that's things you can look up on your own, I suppose. But we will start talking about the past of Dorn. And the first thing we will talk about is the 10,000 ships and Voynich lore and Nymeria, because Nymeria is the best. Sure it is. I just think it's a really cool story, and I don't know where to go from there.
It's very much something out of legend, like a lot of the history, like Land the Clever and all that stuff. But with Nymeria, there's a lot more physical proof of what happened, that were given in the story and everything, which is neat. I don't know. It's definitely got that sort of tall tale aspect to it in some ways. Like I think they shouldn't actually have the big thing is shouldn't actually have 10,000.
Yeah,
ships.
10,000 ships is a name for
nice
story.
They
and
were
romance.
nice
That's what you come up with when you want something to sound epic. You pick a round number.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Very
there's definitely that aspect to it. For sure. Exactly. You make things up. Great example.
I heard that there were some people who came here that wanted part of the photo shoot, but because it was raining, they didn't know where it was.
Oh.
We are doing it straight down, just around the corner from the balcony at the back, and you were looking for it.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry guys, when we have stuff that's scheduled outside, sometimes weather gets in the way. Thankfully, this is something small and not the wolf pictures or not the tournament.
True that.
So, anyway.
But yeah, I mean, prior to the arrival of Nymeria and her however many ships, Dornish history is not exceptionally interesting. There's some cool stories, but it's very similar to the stories of the rest of the Seven Kingdoms, where you have smaller fiefdoms arrive, struggle pitilessly for power, gradually kingdoms expand, law and culture and architecture and roads expand along with them. With Dorne, there's the added interest of water being this kind of priceless commodity, because of course it's a desert for the most part. So you have kind of lots of cultural institutions built around water. I mean, the very first sentences in Ariane's first POV chapter, the Queenmaker, are about her and her party arriving at a well and kind of how central it is to that location. But yeah, once you have Nymeria show up is when Dorne really starts developing into Dorne as we know it, as a cultural identity. You have the emphasis in Nymeria's exiled people on women having authority and being warriors and taking political charge, and that filters across most Dornish houses in the wake of their arrival. You have just the kind of general theme of exiled peoples coming to a place and immersing culturally and bringing their own ideas, and how Dorne kind of ends up being more kind of culturally open and permissible and tolerant than a lot of other parts of Westeros, in large part because of that influence. And of course you have what Nymeria's people were running from, which was the Valyrians, who had conquered their lands and their people in Essos. So right away you have this theme of Dorne versus the dragons, that Dorne is the part of Westeros that's going to most strongest resist Valyrian influence, as we see throughout the arrival of Targaryens in Westeros. That gets more complicated when Dorne, of course, marries, the Martells rather marry into the Targaryens, and they're brought into the realm that way, and after that they sort of have a more investment in Targaryen control, and we can see that up to the date in The Song of Ice and Fire. But, and we'll get into this as we get into the future of House Martell and Dorne, that might end up rebounding on themselves, and we might once again find Dorne taking on the dragons in a disastrous way.
Yeah, what he said. Good stuff. Good job. I mean, yeah, I couldn't really add much more to that. Though as a theme, I do like the whole idea of like kind of Nymeria being like this grand leader of the Island of Misfit Toys kind of deal. Just look, we found a spot, it's ours, and we'll fight tooth and nail to take it. And I just think that's a really cool story to have.
Like Tara said, it's really romantic. I remember seeing the picture of her in the World of Ice and Fire, like looking out over the horizon from her ship.
Long, beautiful, flowing.
Yeah, it was one of those images. Some of those images in that book are just clearly just right from his imagination, and that was one of those. You could see just that she had her whole kingdom in mind, her whole plan in mind in that moment.
Whole people in that moment.
Exactly, and it's a really inspiring kind of origin myth and creation story. And a lot of when you go back into the backstory of this world, you get more cynical as you go. As you find out, like, oh, these guys weren't that interesting or weren't that different from what we thought, but. That's one story you get really swept up in the romance of it once you get into it.
Well, I mean, Nymeria arriving, and she is the reason why the Martells became the ruling house. Like,
exactly.
Like you said, it was all these little fiefdoms, and then Nymeria shows up and marries.
Moors.
I was gonna say Moors, and I was like.
Of sand ship.
Yeah, Moors. So she marries Moors Martell, and they turn into the ruling dynasty like fairly quickly. After that. So this woman showing up and changing the entire history of that area of Westeros. I mean, honestly, that's why I love Dorne so much, because it's really the one place in Westeros where we get to see women be like leaders of their own accord, and it's really all thanks to her. So.
I always find I could somehow make the argument that the North is more culturally diverse to some extent, but I feel like truly the Dorne has way more cultural diversity into it, because you have First Men in the Andals and the Rhoynar, which are they're only there, and I think that's just great, because I mean, who doesn't like the blending of cultures and food?
It gives you a sign of hope. I agree about the North. I mean, when we just mentioned Moors Martell, I remembered, Moors Umber also exists. They have this name in common, even though they're at the opposite sides of Westeros.
First Men.
Exactly. So I think there are both the North and Dorne have that kind of romantic independent streak in common. Where it's like we were here before Westeros as a common cultural identity was a thing. We believed in ourselves. So you have that in common for sure. I agree.
Which there's a passage in World of Ice and Fire talking about a Maester who says like. Who explains that as like they're both fiercely independent, because one's hot, one's cold, but like they never truly had to fight and lose to the dragons, and it's because Dorne knelt, which whatever, but he knelt. I was a smart move, and then Mary at that point was like no, and then they had to get married in because they needed to be seen as equals. So
it was almost opposite reactions, right? The North surrendered to the Targaryens, but really, after that, they still largely governed themselves, except for Jaehaerys and Alysanne showing up to kind of lay down the law. The North were mostly left alone. Whereas the Dornish resisted fiercely, and you have that great line when it's Rhaenys, right, who shows up in Sunspear when the Targaryens first arrive in Westeros and says they've come to have everyone in Westeros bend the knee, and the Martells say this is Dorne, you are not wanted here. And there's just a chill goes down your spine when you get that. This is kind of sense of. That fierceness, which has really defined how Dorne kind of resisted from that point on.
And it just kept going, because then there was Aegon's conquest, and that didn't work out as well. He lost Rhaenys and a dragon, which was pretty impressive. And then Dorne eventually got annexed, of course, as we know, by Daemon first, and married into it. And then you have the rebellion, which I also think is very interesting for Dorne, because on the Targaryen side, finally after the marriage, but then they've been, ever since then, we know them to be incredibly cautious about everything. So
it's the grand irony, like they were the outcasts for so long, the underdog, being beaten up by the Empire, and then as soon as they bought in, as soon as they became in charge, they suffered for it. In Robert's Rebellion, suddenly the Dornish are on the side of the establishment, so to speak, and you get the horrible rape and murder that is inflicted upon House Martell as a result. So, I mean, that's a constant theme with Dorne too. Is just as they get into power, everything starts going horribly wrong.
Well, really, just as soon as they get involved in things outside of Dorne. Because I mean, again, look, they sent over into King's Landing. That did not go well.
They sent Quentyn to Slaver's Bay. How did that go? But when they fight on their own terms, when they fight on Dornish soil, they win every time. I mean, as you were saying, there's the guerrilla campaign against Aegon the Conqueror, which is a really inspiring, amazing thing, that they have dragons, these, flying weapons of mass destruction. But the Dornish are able to hold on to their land by, fighting back with arrows, or attacking and then running away and disappearing amidst the sands. Really classic guerrilla techniques, and it shows like you have this combination of this real fantasy element, this real unreality thing, and then the kind of hard military stuff, which I think is really interesting.
So I think like there's also we have of course the North has suffered from southern ambitions, so I feel like they're also for Dorne there's a sense of northern ambitions.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it.
That's great.
Trademark, little trademark.
Is it Northern?
Northern.
Those are
Gotta make it slightly
trouble sometimes here in Mo. Is your microphone turned up as loud as everybody else's?
Oh, you might. I think you might need to speak closer to
Okay,
that one.
I also mumble, so that doesn't help. I mumble and I ramble. I'm hard to talk to. Yeah. Okay. So I'll. First panel. Doing great. Okay. So let's talk. So I think we nailed down the past a little bit. We could talk about the present. So do we want to talk about the show first and just get that Band-Aid out the way?
It's festering within us.
Yeah, I think it's better to just rip it off, especially because we do actually have, kind of new material from when, chapters that have been released from Winds of Winter. So that's fun. That's fun to talk about because it does show us that there is more to Dorne.
Excellent point, yeah.
But let's rip off that show Band-Aid.
Okay, so the show is kind of terrible. We all know this. In multiple ways, it's not a good time. If you watch the show,
seen the show but not read the books, don't know it better.
Yeah. I'm not saying. This is very let's be real. The dynamic.
Even people who have not read the books know that Dorne in the show was a mess. I've read articles from people who are like, I've only watched the show, and what were they doing? I was reading some listicle a week or two ago, and it was like worst like show storylines or worst show characters or something, and it specifically said the Sand Snakes and Game of Thrones.
Yeah, this is an area, even if you're into it for the spectacle or for the acting,
which is fine,
and you're willing to ignore script problems, which is totally fine. I do that with plenty of shows, but that was one area where even that couldn't save you, because the cheapness and ineptitude of the execution of the fight scenes of the storyline was just so blatant that there was nothing cool to distract you, so it just fell apart.
I didn't actually watch too much of the show, to be honest. Because I read the books, which doesn't make it better. But it's a little bit of a mess. I think it could have been. They cut out all of the cool characters. The Sand Snakes are cool. I love those three. Doran's neat. Elliot's cool. But you're missing all of Doran's children, except for Trystane.
Right.
Yeah.
He was there to get killed.
Who tried to make a queen.
Right.
There was no Quentin, poor Quentin. Way to do that all day.
I remember being baffled by the decision to leave Ariana, because that's a character designed for HBO.
Those nipples, guys.
They're glorious.
She schemes politically in bed, naked. There's nothing.
That's a big
cinematically. Martin used to write for TV. You can tell with him writing Ariane's scenes that he had the blocking and the scene transitions in mind. It's perfect.
This was canon's exposition.
Exactly. Some stuff I get why you don't adapt. I love the Griffin Young Griff storyline, but I get why that's not in the show. It would seem like complete bloat and a waste of time in that medium. But excising Ariane and choosing instead to focus on the Sand Snakes, who are fine, but they're there for to provoke the story in Dorne. They're there to be angry, and then the main characters, Doran and Ariane, really have to react to them. If you make them the focus, I think especially if you take away all their defining traits and just make them all kind of anonymous, which I can't even tell them apart in the show.
I have no idea which one is which.
Hilarious and Lady them are better anyway than I think. They're a lot more interesting.
In the books, they've got the perfect comic book division. You got Oberyn, she's the warrior, and she gets drunk, and she's angry, and she's loud. She's got this sad backstory, and then Nymeria is the politician and the smart one, and talks really well, and Tyene is the one that pretends to be sweet and innocent, but she's the most dangerous one. They're not super depthful, but they're really well defined. You can tell what each one wants to do and why they want to do it. And in the show, they're just there. And
one has
not even well.
One has a skill, one has daggers, and one has a whip.
Sexy. There's nothing.
Yeah. And even with the other Sand Snakes, you forgot Sorella, who
True.
We don't have much about her in the books yet. That's fine. But She's at Old Town, so it could have been cool to have Sam shows up all like, I don't know, because why do I have my dad's sword? And you just see this cool, you just see another cool maester who's actually
they're a lord's daughter, not sellswords. Like they acted like.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I don't know. They're just randomly marching around the doors or something.
They're violent in the books, but they're not stupid. Like they're supposed to have a plan and an agenda that's not. I mean, so for me, what I love about the Dorna storyline in Feast for Crows is you have this setup that keeps constantly changing. Like at the start of that storyline, it's the Sand Snakes. They're the threat. They want vengeance for their father. Oberyn killed in King's Landing. Dorna's angry, and that's what Doran is focused on. It has them arrested and think, okay, that's the plot. And then suddenly it changes and it's actually about Arianne, who's just in the background at first, but then she's got the secret plan cooking and is telling her secret lover about it. And you think, okay, it's going to be about her. It's her story. She wants to go make herself the heir to Dorne and get crowned Myrcella, and this is going to be the storyline. Then that plan completely falls apart, and her father finds out about it, and it falls to pieces in front of her eyes. Her lover was killed. She's taken off as prisoner. And then you think, okay, it's just about the clap. That's what the story's about. And then at the very end of it, her father quietly revealed that he's been a Targaryen supporter this whole time, and it completely changes everything that came before.
Playing the long con.
Exactly, it's great, and it's this very great plot construction where every beat is planned. It takes place over only 4 chapters, but it's enough for a whole novel in terms of twists and your understanding of what's going on.
And Doran's speech is so good.
And Doran has this amazing monologue where this guy has been like so restrained the whole time, and the most, Tywin describes him as cautious, almost indolent to a degree, as a schemer, and that you get this sense that he's finally saying the words he's been waiting so long to say to somebody. To his daughter, the person who's been holding back from the whole time, and he whispers fire and blood, and presses the dragon piece into her palm, and it's one of those moments we all remember reading from the books. And then in the show.
The only thing I know from the show,
instead of one person saying the vengeance, justice, fire, and blood speech, makes sense. You have vengeance and justice, and then Varys just walks in to say fire and blood, he's been waiting behind the hedge listening. This is the part in my speech, guys. We had it planned out. We had rehearsals and everything.
With Olenna, who clearly there's been a strong rivalry with Dorne. They say it in this show. I don't even remember the show, but they're like, the Leech and Dorne kind of hate each other because they keep raiding each other, yada yada. But then it's like, Olenna and Ellaria, they're just now friends.
They're just now together
because we're
friends. I mean, it's the facade of drama that kind of has taken over the show at a lot of points. Where I understand from the staging that this is supposed to be important, but just the way they're actually executing the dialogue and the characters is just not dramatic at all. And then the books. Dorne isn't perfect. There are some secondary characters that I think, Areo Hoda, Aerys Elfhart are not superbly developed compared to the secondary characters in other parts of the story, but the structure is really strong, and you get what's going on the whole time. Whereas with Dorne, I was on the show I was just watching, I was just genuinely going, what is happening? Yeah. Which is not usually my question. Usually the show is bad in other ways, not even just getting across the information to me. What's happening?
Ellaria kills Myrcella with poison lipstick or something? What are we watching?
Joel Schumacher, guest director on Game of Thrones.
Yes. But and Ellaria's, as much as the Sand Snakes are just disgust and frustrate me in the show, Ellaria is one of those, in the books when Oberyn dies, she doesn't want revenge. She just wants her family to be safe, and she wants peace, and she doesn't want any more children to lose their loved ones or come to harm. And instead in the show, she is just one track mind. And it's sad because I guess they thought that they couldn't make her an interesting or believable character by having her, instead of want revenge, want to just sit back and mourn her lover and protect her family.
She's got that amazing monologue in the books where they've been delivered Gregor's skull, the head of the man who killed her lover in this horrible public fashion, and you got his daughters proclaiming that they're going to wipe out the Lannisters down to the children in revenge for it. And she has this monologue about here is the skull of your father's killer. Can I take this to bed? Can I drink with it? Will it make me laugh when I am old? Will this give me any of the things that your father gave me? This is what vengeance is worth to me. It's just a skull. It doesn't help it doesn't solve any of our emotional wounds. It hasn't brought Dorne back to its prior place. It's just nothing. And the Sand Snakes disagree, of course, and I think Duran disagrees at some level. He really, understandably, this horrible thing happened to his sister and her children. He wants some kind of closure and catharsis for it. But what she's saying is that you're not going to have it. Duran's could take over the whole kingdom and kill everyone who was connected to the people who hurt his family, and he's still not going to have his sister back.
Yeah.
And I feel like what was also good with the lie, which I will say, Indira Varma is the actress who plays Alaya.
Yeah.
Really good job of it.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I'm in the shows actually, but I'm like, she did really good.
She did a great job with what she was given.
Exactly.
Yes.
Cast is trying their hardest.
Exactly. I feel like with Alaya they missed out because they forgot all the younger Sand Snakes, so we don't understand why she has all this revenge just for her husband when she understands that she could be breaking the cycle to protect her actual children, even whatever bastard children and step kids, whatever. But there was that, and I feel like would also end up happening, which I had friends who are not here, but they also have very strong feelings about Dawn. It just ends up having this stereotype of Dawn, and also to some extent just people who look Dornish, as just being very hot-tempered and angry and full of revenge, and it's not a good stereotype to have, especially because it also kind of have it with a lot of women.
Yeah.
So it's like, they're just always hot, hot-tempered and angry because whatever.
Yeah, there's not an actual explanation of their motives or why. The people who want revenge in the books, you're not supposed to agree with them, but you're supposed to understand why they think what they think. We spend time with Wyman Manderly and Duran Martell, and we get this sense of why they want to kill the people who hurt their family. But in the show at this point, it's just how they are, Which women be stabbing. It's just like that's what he was stabbing. As much as I love Lena Headey, that's what Cersei is at this point. It's been slowly sucked out.
Which I also will say, what I also do not like about Dorne is they have spoilers. Do I need to say anything about? Okay, when Obara kills Trystane in the show.
What?
Damn it, Mo.
This is why I can't have nice things. He gets a spear right in the face, which is kind of cool. But it's pretty much kinslaying, which is equal to, say, people like Ramsay in the show and a bunch of other super shitty characters. So, that wasn't cool at all because that's the whole big taboo. It's like, don't kill your siblings and relatives because it's not nice. And then you basically make the Sand Snakes that too, which I was not happy about a little bit.
In vengeance for my family, I will kill my family. Wait.
But,
let's go over this plan one more time.
And Jordan. Well, yeah.
I don't, and I guess, like you said, you mentioned it earlier, I think they may have had plans for Dorne in the show at some point, but something happened and they just decided to throw it all out the window. Because by the way, does Dorne even exist in the show anymore? Their ruling family is dead and we've not heard mention of them since.
They cut their losses.
That just because the snakes killed Duran and Tristan, that everyone else in Dorne is just accepting them as the new rulers.
And they did the same thing with the Reach too. It's just Olenna's gone, so there's no more Reach and there's no more Dorne. The whole southern third of Westeros doesn't exist anymore.
Which is exactly right. Which is a common thing.
Cutting loose ends.
Exactly.
Isn't it just like we don't need Dorne, we don't need the Reach. Let's just
throw them overboard.
They've gone. Okay, Dany, Cersei, Jon, boat sex. We're making mid-season 8 happen. That's all we got.
But that's a common thing with the show. They take a story that has a lot of cynicism about politics, and they turn into nobody cares about politics.
Yeah.
That's what's become. Even though, Dorne in the books and in the backstory is the kind of stirring counter to that, where it was the Martells and the nobles who ultimately surrendered to the Targaryens. It was the small folk who kept up the fight. It was one of the hugest peasant-led political movements in the history of Westeros, and it demonstrates that the peasants may not care about the Game of Thrones in terms of what claim you have to have the crown, but they do have political beliefs and ideologies and are willing to fight and die for them. And as it's presented on the show, it's just like they're not there, and it's just these 5 people fighting in a room, and there's not even consequences for that. Like when Ramsay killed Roose, and it was just meaningless. Ramsay killing Roose, I think, is probably going to happen in the books in some capacity. It's been set up pretty strongly, but it's got to mean something. You can't just have the Northern Lords who built, like you said, this whole belief system around kinslaying, treat that like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Especially in the North.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess they didn't. They might have kind of tossed the kinslaying thing out the window. Come to think of it, because have they really ever brought like the Tyrion thing up in like seasons and seasons and seasons?
Yeah. Well, that's another example of it with Tyrion, where his kind of pain and anger and horribleness got leached out of the show so quickly.
Bran has that speech in the show about the Rat King or at the Night Fort or whatever it is. He kind of has they kind of go over a little bit, but
that's true.
That is a lot of justification for why Stannis. People like, we gotta kill Stannis because he killed his brother. So a little bit, but also.
I mean, but fans justifying something like that is different than like the show. I think just they wanted to kill Stannis because D&D like clearly hated Stannis, and honestly, I feel like. It's actually different because I don't actually feel like they hate Dorne. I feel like they don't care about it, and if that's the case, then they probably should have just left it out altogether.
Exactly. From what we gathered, Brian Cogman, the writer, was like the big motivating force for Dorne to even be a thing on the show. Whatever you think about Brian Cogman, he's more into the books than a lot of the people who work on the show. So I think that was something he was pushing for. But I agree. It was. There could be nothing more Stannis than being misinterpreted and hated by the people adapting. The fact that the guy who never gets credit for anything and is hated by everybody in universe gets zero credit for anything and is hated by people adapting the story is just mwah. Like, as a Stannis fan, that there's a perverse joy to that for me that I love. But yeah, with Dorne, it's just dispiriting because you hate to be in a situation where you say it was better if they just hadn't done it. Yeah. That sucks, but it would just be better if they hadn't done it. If nothing else, that's more money and energy you could spend on other things that weren't that great. So.
And maybe they liked Oberyn enough.
And Oberyn,
that's a pretty badass like storyline, whatever. But then they were like, shit, like. Now we had to kill Oberyn. So what do we?
How do we tell a story about how Oberyn's daughters are angry people and maybe Oberyn worldview wasn't great? How do we do that? Yeah. Moving on to the future.
I don't know. Do we want to mention anything related to the minor houses? Because there's a lot of they're all kind of.
There's some of the greatest minor houses names ever in the world.
I forgot my names because Ola was cool because they was the one that actually kind of killed the dragon, and they're like kind of the crazy people, even though Alaria's kind of sane. And then I don't know. I just made Dolph because obviously I have an affinity for lemons. If anyone pick that up. But I also think the Ironwoods are also incredibly important, at least from the books, because there've been like a lot of the Seven Kingdoms. They have like what I call the second bananas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because so you have like within the north, you have like the Boltons and the Manderleys, and the Plowmans. So like Westerlands, you have Tarleys. Oh, that'd be.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the Reach.
Yeah, the Reach has a lot because you also have like high towers. Like, but basically anybody who was related.
Don't allow second bananas.
Yeah, the Lannisters. What's the raids for a long time?
The Riverlands has a bunch too. The Freys, the Mallisters, Blackwoods, and the Brackens.
Yeah. So and then in Dorne they have a lot of it is with the Ironwoods, who were these big, really cool kings, and a lot of it.
Gloss over the day.
Well, no, we cannot cross over. Well,
I mean,
are
the Danes really Dornish?
Yeah, the Danes are like their own thing.
There's my girl. Listen, do you want to talk about Ashara Dane for the rest of the panel? I wish I could. I know Clay would love it, but I don't know about
Next year, every panel is going to be about Ashara Dane.
The Danes almost feel. The Danes to me almost feel like they have more in common with the stuff going on right next door in the Reach, the southwestern part of the Reach, with the crazy Lovecraftian history behind Old Town and that part of the world. I don't know, the Danes with the purple eyes and their cool magic sword, magic tower feel like almost they have more in common with that stuff than they do with the rest of Dorne. That's just how it feels like to me.
They're right on the line.
Right, and with R plus L equals J, they're obviously so heavily wrapped up in that, and that's so important to the magical and mystical plot. So so much of Dorne is about the politics more than the magical plot. The Danes are kind of the exception to the rule there.
True. I think really cool, and I know I didn't see Chloe, so I did not mention them. I apologize because I love Chloe a whole lot. Not as much as Emmett. But we can talk about the future if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did they do? We want to talk about the Aeon stuff from The Winds of Winter. Yes, we did. The past and present, how it shapes the future, and then Aeon doing and the roles in the coming war, which will be.
Yeah, I will say we are going to talk about the Winds of Winter chapters from Arion. So, like, if any of you are abstaining from Winds of Winter chapters, this is just your warning. Leave now.
There is a couple, but it's just she travels a lot. She just keeps going north, is for the most part. But there's, I think, a lot of cool hints where she meets with House Toland, who has. Back in the day, like they didn't kill the dragon, but they have the dragon eating this tail, which is very symbolic of like how to defeat dragons. And there's like, Aelion gets a bunch of possible knowledge in books of like how to defeat dragons. She just ignores it, which is fine.
That's probably telling.
Yeah.
That's going to be trouble.
Yeah, because like they mentioned one of the books she had was like it was like Septim Thoughts, perhaps, which might have didn't get burnt. And so it's like, oh, they'd probably tell you how to kill dragons, but she didn't read it. It was boring. So you have this whole quest she's going on to go see
Aegon
Targaryen the Sixth, young with him, who of course we all. If you've been following it, there's a high chance he is a Blackfire man. So you have this, so it's this odd, like, I feel it's really weird because they were so against dragons, and then they started going for the red dragons, and now it's like, well, we want to try and get revenge, so we might have this black dragon do this kind of thing. And it's, I don't know, it's very odd.
They're all gonna die.
Exactly.
I do like Arian's travel log though.
Yeah, she goes through the Rainwood. It's really cool.
Which mentions like these stone faces. So there was this whole thing about possibly like that's like because like the children of the forest and you know they get the caves and the forest.
Exactly, the very air.
So you know it taps in a lot more of the fantasy and supernatural that we don't have a whole lot of.
From Dorne,
especially from Dorne.
Exactly right.
I didn't know. I'm like, oh, cool. Those really neat caves with stone faces in the Stonelands. We don't hear much about them either.
It's true.
So I think that's really neat. And I like her party, which has Elias and
who's just the younger her, basically.
Younger her,
sent along to torment her by her dad.
She's like
the most father-daughter thing.
She's like she's a young Oberyn, and I think they also throw a lot of allusions or comparisons to Lyanna. Like this very strong tomboyish gal who likes jousting and
riding horses,
and doesn't care and makes some naughty jokes and that kind of deal. And she's like traveling with her ex-boyfriend too, which I think is kind of silly.
Yeah, Daemon Sand, who knows her better than anyone. So when she starts trying to, weasel out her feelings about Quentyn, he kind of cuts through. But yeah, I love that you brought up the House Toland sigil, the dragon eating its own tail. That's a kind of classic image of time, is the snake eating its own tail, and circles of time and things coming back on themselves. And that's definitely what we see in the Martell plot. Like you said, they've been both in league with and against the dragon before multiple times, and that's coming up again. They're kind of interesting to have the Martell side with the Blackfires, if unknowingly, because of course the Martells have been bitter enemies of the Blackfires since the Blackfires existed.
With the exception of Ironwood sometimes, which goes.
That's true, and that might come up in the story going forward. The Ironwood's fought in several Blackfire rebellions and might decide to do so again. But yeah, I mean, if you look at those Arianne chapters, I love her travelogue. I love the kind of description of the nature, but there's also these strong hints that it's all going to go very, very poorly. When she meets with the Toland family, one of them, Tiora Toland, the youngest member of the family, has what sounds strongly like prophetic dreams, even though her family dismisses them. And she says, in her dreams, the dragons were dancing, and everywhere the dragons danced, the people died, which is, of course, very resonant with Dornish history, given the calamitous dragon-led invasions. And then, even more blatant, in her second release, Winds of Winter chapter, when she's dealing with Elias Sand, as you said, being naughty and flirting with the servant, she runs off at one point, and Arianne grabs her and yells, "You could have died." And Martin describes it, die, echoing off the cave walls, which is pretty blatant foreshadowing of it going horribly wrong for these characters. I mean, that's what we've seen with the Martells so far. As Tara said, whenever they leave Dorne, they get in huge trouble. Oberyn went to King's Landing, got his skull smashed in for his trouble. Quentyn went to Slaver's Bay and got burned to death for his trouble. Not just deaths, but like horrible, violent, grisly deaths that make you feel bad about humanity and just want to curl up into a ball. Like there's nothing heroic or stirring about it. It's just awful on purpose, deliberately. I think to have this kind of tragic tone that I think is probably going to befall Doran and Arianne, given that setup. I think, in all likelihood, they're probably going to side with young Griff, and I think Dany's not going to be happy about that.
Yeah. Pretty much.
She should have just married Quentin then.
Exactly. Poor sad boy.
I would. I mean, he tried. He gave.
That's House Martell's words. We tried. Ariana with the queen making, Quentin with the dragon taming, Oberyn with Gregor. So we did our best, and we just failed horribly.
Yeah.
But they're still going through it, and that's like the resilient folks.
Yeah, that's what makes it sad.
Also really
They're
cool
trying.
because I always think going to school because they don't,
They get knocked down, and they get up again.
Precisely, that's their thing. Yeah, we tried their words, and that's their theme song. It's now canonical.
House Martell is the huge number one. Yeah, do you all got any questions or comments, concerns, criticisms? By me, all means, I will just direct them totally.
I have an opportunity for Emmett to be entertainingly opinionated.
Yeah, that's me.
About the Quentin chapter and Preston Jacobs' commentary about it. If we assume that, I think you think that Dance with Dragons is George at his best. He's been doing this for a while. This is some of the best writing.
Agreed.
And you agree that the point of Quentin's story is to be tragic and to fail. There's a lot of shiftiness in that chapter about George is doing that thing where someone is about to die, and then the camera cuts away. That's the end of the chapter. That's usually the point where something unexpected happens, because we assume something happens, and we come back to it, we find out that wasn't the thing. And when Barristan is talking to whoever else is present, they're relating what happened. Literally the text is saying that they're giving each other shifty looks about while they're having it. Do you have an alternate explanation other than why Quentin is alive?
Sure.
Something's going on.
The cutting away point is perfectly valid. He did that with Davos, Theon, Arya, a bunch of different characters where we've had fake out deaths. Then again, we've also had Arya being turned away from Ned as he is executed. We didn't actually see that happen on the page, and Ned is very much dead. So I think there's some variation. I think Martin does that on purpose. I think he wants you to be unsure and not always know, because if it was a guarantee every time he did that the person was alive, that would give it away too. So I think it's a perfectly valid argument, but I think it could just as easily be the counterexample where he cuts away for purely dramatic purpose. Like we get this one horrible image of Quentin on fire, and him realizing at that moment he thinks to himself, and it's all falling apart as he realized it was all for nothing. His friends died for nothing. He's not the hero. He's never going home. He's just going to burn to death. And I think Martin cut away at that point for dramatic purposes, but I think it's totally valid. It might have been to keep a secret. As for Drink and Arch looking at each other shiftily, I'd have to look at the page, but from what I remember about that scene, it's Barristan kind of digging into their motives with the Tattered Prince, and the promise Quentin made to the Tattered Prince to deliver him Pentos in exchange for helping him get the dragon. I remember they were being shifty about admitting that and about helping the Tattered Prince kind of fulfill that promise for Barristan. Again, I'd have to look at the scene. I don't have it right in front of me. In general, about Quentin, the reason I think he's dead is because it's built into his storyline from the beginning on. The very first words of his first POV chapter are "Adventure stank," referring to a ship named Adventure, but the wordplay is pretty clear. That his story is about how this, beautiful banner shining fantasy quest he's been promised is just an endless series of horrors and humiliations and losses along the way. I think it's perfectly thematically congruent that it ends with his death, in the same way that kind of Ned having the scales fall from his eyes at King's Landing led to his death. If Quentin comes back now, I think it's going to just feel cheap, and I think it's going to feel like his character is done and he's got nothing else to do. It would be for me the equivalent of having Syrio Forel not actually be dead, which is another example. The whole point of Syrio Forel is that he gave his life for Arya, and that he did it willingly because that's what being First Sword meant to him. Not being a badass, not being able to escape, not having the great stories told about you, but that willingness, that the First Sword does not run.
No choice.
And Quentin, no chance and no choice, exactly right. And Quentin, for much sadder reasons, didn't run either.
Well, to your other point previously, you said that not just him, but everything that they tried as a family or as a house failed.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just him. It's Quentin's failure in Slaver's Bay is meant to parallel Oberyn's failure in King's Landing. It's meant to parallel, I think, what's going to happen to Arianne and the Stormlands. I think this is just a repeated motif for the Martells. I think Quentin being alive. It was also just, what would he do? What would his story be? What would his character be about at this point? I mean, I love him, but I love him in large part because of his sadness and doom. Like, he's not... I don't think he can carry a story on his own without that arc. So, we'll see.
He's kind of an everyman.
He's exactly right. He's supposed to be normal.
He's supposed to just like Ariana, of course, multiple details about her breasts.
He's Charlie.
And then Quentin's just like, he kind of looks like toady and kind of gross and just like, he's just
He
like,
knows, because he knows deep
I just
down.
want to kiss an Iron
Says
Wood.
it like, if I was a princess, I wouldn't.
Exactly right.
Same thing.
That's the point. He's being pushed into this role where he's supposed to be the Messiah, and he knows deep down that he's not cut out for this remotely, but for the sake of his family and his friends who died getting him there, he keeps trying. And I think the ultimate tragedy of that is that, yeah, he dies, and he was obviously going to die, but he kept going because he couldn't see any other way to live.
Well, I mean, and not every. What I like about it is that it's well written because it's proof that not every male hero has to be a hero. Like, not every guy character has to be a Rob or a John. Sometimes there's just a Quentin, and
that makes
We do have yes. Quick.
Sort of changing the subject a little bit. What role do you think the Dornish are going to play in the upcoming political upheaval in King's Landing? Since they sent Tyene, was it, or Nymeria?
No, they sent Lady both.
Different missions.
And like Cersei being kind of dethroned is gonna, and then Kevin dying.
I think that's doing a lot of the placing his bets because he's got Lady Nym on the council. He's got Tyene with the High Septon. He's got Sorella in Old Town. So he's just, I feel like he's utilizing the Sand Snakes as a good spy network.
I mean, I think Sorella is in Old Town because she wants to be.
I would lean towards that, given how she talks about it.
And they kind of talk about her as like this person who exists and everything, but like, and they know where she is and they're fine with it, but I don't think she's part of any like overreaching plot. I think it's good for them that she's there, but I think she's there for a volition.
Leave her to her game, I think.
She has her own game, but
it fits, yeah.
With the rest of them, I think that there's a good chance that there's going to be some kind of, perhaps in the books, there's going to be more like High Septon shenanigans, and Tyene might possibly get involved with that. And I don't know how they're going to treat Lady Nym so well because sure, she's Valanche noble, but she's also a bastard from Dorne, which at least Dorne's cool about bastards, but the rest of the kingdom isn't. So.
I don't know, man. Cersei gets along great with other powerful women. I have no idea.
I mean, trashy. If I can speak as a trashy person,
please do.
I mean, she already kind of hooked up with Tiana, and I was like, well, if you're gonna throw another hot, kind of foreign-looking lady in King's Landing, by all means, I won't stop you. Considering we already know that.
She's got to get her kicks somewhere.
Right? We already know.
What's the future for House Martell? Are they still running Dorne at the end of this, or?
Trystane might be alive if he gets somewhere safe.
Sorella's really smart. Stay where they are.
Yeah, just fine. No, I mean, Sorella's really smart. She's out of the way of all that stuff. Maybe she. I like her a lot. She's got that great line about. She's in Old Town. That's true. She's in the way of her own other impending disaster. No one is safe. But she has that line I love about she's doing archery practice and she misses the last one and someone says, you always miss the last one. She says, the day you make them all, the day you stop improving. Which is just great. That's just a great, nice line. I like her a lot.
We had one more? I don't know if
we have one more quick one.
You try to see a parallel between the Stark family and the Martell family. They start out doing great when they're in the right place, and then the moment they try to go out of that place.
The South on ambitions and North on ambitions.
Yeah, that's just what you start out with.
That's really what it is.
Like,
no, I mean, it's absolutely what it is.
Is there a parallel?
The Water Gardens and the Kettle Master eats with Ned Stark, and then the Water Gardens, the small folk swim with the Lord's children.
Yeah. Exactly right. There's that connection to the small folk.
They integrate themselves in the culture of things.
Dawn's cool that way. They have.
And then they leave those places, and things are bad.
Ironwoods versus the Boltons, as Mo pointed out. Is the second in command that kind of always resents their position. And you have, even family relations. Oberyn versus Duran is very similar to Brandon versus Ned in a lot of ways. You have the wild, kind of sexually active warrior one, and the quiet, reserved, arguably smarter one. Arguably in Ned's case. But, so I think, Stark and Martell parallels, I think, are so many that they're definitely deliberate. We brought up Lady Lance and Lyanna earlier. I definitely agree.
All right, we got to wrap up because we have Quiplash happening in here.
True, but we'll just give a shout out to Spicy Food and Spicy Women in Dorne. So thank you for coming to the panel.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
I appreciate it a lot.